Good afternoon, Art Deco. Welcome on VH Berries.
Good evening to you, and thanks for having me, Victor.
I am extremely grateful, and when I'm hearing your voice, Art Deco, I can feel that you are ready as Freddy.
Ready, Freddy, yeah. Ready, Freddy, as they say, yeah.
Absolutely. I would love to discuss about your latest release and album that you published and released on the 175th day of this year. But before, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I just moved into a new apartment in Victoria. So over my left shoulder, there's like one quadrant of the living room that's set up that I'm willing to share with whomever is tuning in the interwebs. But on my right shoulder, it's hell, it's chaos, it's box city, it's like furniture that needs to be assembled. But yeah, I got the little, the studio set up here, so I'm ready to record.
Ready to record. And Art Deco, last time we spoke, I remember that the wall behind you was almost blank and that you had, as you just mentioned, multiple boxes. Do we have some improvement since the last time?
Yeah, just I framed it just enough to make it like resemble a mature young man's apartment. But yeah, like I said, it's movie magic. It's like one of those like movie sets in the 1950s where behind it, it's just blocks of wood keeping the walls from falling down. It's kind of a metaphor for my life, really.
It is a metaphor for your life, and I truly believe, Art Deco, that blank walls can also be very great, especially, for example, in your video clip called Only Ones, because it puts all the focus on the subject in front of the walls.
Yeah. I think you're referring to the music video for Only Ones?
Absolutely.
I mean, all the credit goes to the director, Brandon William Fletcher. Let's give some flowers to Brandon. Sorry, Brandon. He's like a genius. I can't pump his tires enough. He's like a one-man wrecking crew. Shoots, directs, edits, produces. Yeah, that was his kind of love child. We've been collaborating on a few videos, but yeah, props to Brandon. He also did the Midlife Crisis video, the Palm Slave video, and then on my last album, he worked on a video called Desires. And also some credit to Lou Wu, who does a really good job coloring. I learned that color and grading post-edit is like super important, and it's kind of where all the visual magic kind of gets elevated. So, flowers to you, Lou.
Let's give those flowers to, as you just mentioned, Brandon William Fletcher, who directed and edited this video, to Lou, who colored the video, and also to Mark Lawson, who did all the mix.
Yeah, Mark Lawson, definitely. Let's just you get flowers. You get flowers. Mark is amazing. So Mark is like also a genius mixer, and mixing is, again, like in the audio world, a lot of albums, when we kind of give props to the production, a lot of the times we're also giving, whether we know it or not, a lot of props to the mix, because a lot of the magic is in the mix. You can take something that was recorded in a bedroom, or like the first two Tame Impala albums, which sound incredible. Dave Fridman mixed them. Were recorded, like Kevin Parker recorded on like a Boss 16 track like digital recorder, and everybody talks about like the production. Really, it's like a lot of the times we're referring to like the mix, in my opinion. So when I produced the album, I had like a hit list of all these, dream mixers, and Mark Lawson was on that mix dream list. And so we flew out, Connor and I, my guitar player who helped engineer on After the Head Rush, we flew out to Montreal in the fall. And Mark works out of this house in downtown Montreal that's like the Arcade Fire compound. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to even describe this place, but if you're like a gearhead, such as I am, it's ridiculous. It's this old kind of 3-story house. I don't even know where it is, so I won't even blow up the spot. It's irrelevant. But they have got like smash-proof like windows because there's so much equipment in there. And there's like Grammys and Emmys hanging up, and like, like they're using them as paperweights. And it's just this beautiful studio compound that the band rehearses. I think they recorded a bunch of Suburbs there. They've had like the craziest musicians come in and out there. The gear in every corner of that, home studio, if you'll call it that, is just ridiculous. Like stuff that would go fetch tens of thousands of dollars on reverb.com. There's like in triplicate of them just collecting dust. Like, oh yeah, we use that on, Reflector, and oh, that's the blah, blah, blah. Like, and I was just like a kid in a candy shop. But yeah, Mark's a G. We totally, he just, I told him, I was like, just imagine Bob Clearmountain, 1985, early 80s, like, let's make this jump through the speakers. And he was like, okay. And it was like a really cool experience.
It was a very cool experience, and I believe that the magic of Art Decos resides, of course, through this blank wall, but also through the instrument that you just mentioned. For example, the genius of Connor, which is a guitarist, and as you just mentioned, that very special place in downtown Montreal.
Yeah, Connor, he's kind of a new addition. He's just like wise beyond his years. I mean, while kids were, I've got like 10 years on him, and he's just like another genius that I'm surrounded by, lucky me. While other kids are like, skateboarding and playing video games, he's like teaching himself Pro Tools as a teenager, and he can play circles around like probably everybody in the band at their bona fide instrument. So yeah, he plays keyboards, guitars, in the live iteration of the band. But he's got a studio here in Victoria called Catalog. Check it out if you're a young musician watching this. And he's like an engineer by trade. And so, I mean, I was just going to bring him into the fold just to play a show. And then it was like, well, COVID happens, there's no shows, but I'm recording an album. Maybe we can do like a couple days at your studio. And then, 2 months later, he's like in deep in, Camp Deco. So I flew him out with me to meet Mark and to hang out. And he was just like invaluable. He's like, he's a jack of all trades, master at like all of them. Flowers to Connor.
Inside the music studio, you're like, as you just mentioned, a kid in the candy shop, but I would also add that you can also be a kid in a truck, especially when you were moving at the age of 6 from a city to another one, listening to AM radio and oldies, which made you felt in love with rock and roll. Can you tell us a little bit more about this episode of your journey?
You do your research. Like, step aside, Nardwar. Victor is flowers to Victor. I was born in Ottawa. My sisters and my mom and dad and I, in the summer of 1990, we moved across Canada because, long story, it doesn't matter. So my sisters and my mom we're in a Ford Tempo just trailing this U-Haul truck. And here I am with my little gumboots on and my shorts and my Ninja Turtles t-shirt with my dad in this truck moving across Canada. And it was like AM radio the entire time. And yeah, there was just like, he tells me now, and I do have a recollection of it. There's like a few songs like, big girls don't cry. Like when they don't cry. Like that just totally just blew my mind. I was the entire was like, is that Cry song coming on? Like, Dad, can we hear that? It's like, Art, it's radio. It'll come on again. Just relax. Every time we come on, I go absolutely crazy. So when we landed in Victoria, we didn't have a lot of money, but one of the things that my parents did was we had this like little, Casio keyboard, and there was like a local piano teacher that came over, and, it was like 3 kids, 1 lesson, just keep us busy for an hour, give my parents a break. And I took to it. My sisters got bored of it. And then I really took to it. And we had this like record player, and the only vinyl records that like survived the move were Christmas albums and like Beethoven, like Moonlight Sonata specifically. I remember hearing that, and it was just like discovering like AM radio and then classical music. It was like, just blew my mind. I was like, what are, like, all these doors were opening up. And so I took to it very quickly. And then the piano teacher took my parents aside, and he's like, look, little Arthur, he needs to go to my piano teacher, George Essahas, because he'll be able to like mentor him. And so, yeah, like once every other week, I'd go to this like weird little church basement, and this man named George Essahas, who's in and of itself, like he had like a crazy jazz career in Canada. He had like 3 pianos, and it smelled like mothballs, and there was all these like newspaper clippings on the walls of like him in the 50s just like killing it, the George Essahas trio, all that. And we didn't play to a metronome, we didn't learn theory. He was like, what do you want to learn? I was like, I want to learn Moonlight Sonata. I'm like 7 years old. He's like, all right, let's take it piece by piece. My little finger is on one piano, and he's sitting beside me, and then he would write out the sheet music, and then he would record like a 30-second snippet on a cassette. And then I would go home for 2 weeks, listen to it, and like learn it. And, every good boy deserves fudge. Okay, that's like an F, like there's F on the piano. And like really like the sheet music that he would write was kind of secondary. It would just kind of reinforce it. It was all about like listening, breaking it down. So it taught me to kind of like, learn music, learn melody. And like by the time I was a teenager, I was like, all right, I'm done with Beethoven. What's next? Let's do some classic rock here. And that kind of was like a bridge to the adolescent years of my Deco adventures.
And Art Deco, at the age of 6, this may be the first time in history that someone has a midlife crisis at this age. Because Midlife Crisis is also a title of your latest release. And I would add that this is track number 5 out of 10 tracks, which is at the perfect center of the album.
With the new album, it's there's like 2 parallel lines. I guess it dovetails into like where I left off on that last story. In that, when I was a teenager working in restaurants, falling in love with rock and roll, learning guitar, I eventually moved to Vancouver, played in bands for, 8-9 years, got burnt out, quit music, moved to a Gulf island, sort of like had a quarter life crisis at that point. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and I was taking care of her. And she would suffer from these bouts of like sundowning, which is like this weird, anybody watching who is living with someone who is living with Alzheimer's or dementia, it's this brutal anxiety kind of panic attack at sunset. And the only thing that would like calm her down would be to like play on her piano. And so eventually she moved into a home And I was in this big house, A-frame house, overlooking this like old apple orchard. Like my grandmother, when she passed away, she was like 90. And so like for the last 10 years of her life, she had like this decline, this cognitive decline with dementia. And so like this apple orchard and this beautiful front yard, and across the street, there's all these like Doug fir trees and a lake, and it's like majestic. There's deer and rabbits and like the mist of the Pacific. It's like so evergreen and beautiful. And here I am, like just, by myself in this house that I used to go to as a kid that had so much vibrance and life. And it was like in this state of like decay, and all the, orchard had been overgrown with caterpillar nests, and, it was just chaos. And there was something there was this weird turning point where like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll get a career in a bank or something. I don't know. But for therapy, just get a bottle of wine, cook myself dinner, and I would just start to play on the piano. And those compositions turned into like early Art Deco songs. And then it just kind of kicked off into this new weird trajectory. And many years later, here I am writing this album, at 36, 37, I'm 38 now, thinking like I've just moved back to Victoria. And all these like memories of like my adolescence are kind of like coming to the forefront. And I'm remembering, like I'm driving around these old haunts thinking like, oh, there's that parking lot I would sneak out to on a Friday night and shotgun a beer with my friends. And oh, there's the bush I puked in. And oh, it's a condo now. And, there's like this duality of like half the songs feel adolescent, this head rush of the youth, and the other half is like this old, jaded, cynical me now, looking like kind of. So there's these two parallel timelines, and I thought like to gift wrap one of them, it'd be cool to have a midlife crisis mid album and have it like speed up and kind of build and feel like you're about to vomit. So yeah.
Absolutely. And Art Deco, during those late 20s, I feel that the location in which you were living played a huge role in what I can call the revival of your creativity, especially in the musical field. This place is called Gulf Island and is located near Vancouver and is surrounded with waters, obviously, but also with beautiful landscapes.
Yeah, it's like, the specific island that I lived on, I don't really talk about because I'm a very private guy, and these islands are they're really tiny communities. But the Gulf Islands is like, there's probably, 15, 20 of them. And yeah, they're between Vancouver Island and the mainland, and they're all connected with these like ferries and stuff. And they're interesting communities. Some of them were like home to a lot of hippies and draft dodgers in the Vietnam War. And some of them just like never went back to America. And some of them are home to like mega mansions and super yachts. But everybody just like keeps to themselves. And it's this very, I don't want to say like lawless place, but it's like a very unique community. Or communities, if you will. So yeah, it was like an interesting kind of like middle period in my life that drove me headfirst into like a newfound creativity that I didn't really know that I had inside of me. And yeah, I haven't lived there in a few years now. I've come home to roost, back to Victoria. So yeah.
And as a teenager, if I understood correctly, you were also working in kitchens? Which means that you were as good when cooking as when cutting, for example, instrumentals.
The thing about being a musician, there's like a handful of jobs that one can, maintain, if you will. It's especially if you're in your late teens or in your 20s. And yeah, kitchens, restaurant, bars, lounges, whatever. They're kind of like a perfect like breeding ground of creatives. And, for a kid that like discovered, I feel like I came late to the rock and roll party. I was like 16 working at this restaurant, and everybody in the kitchen was like 10 years older than me. And back then it was like CD binders. So, when I would like mop the floors at night, I would like open it up like it was like this book of revelations and just like, wow, what is this? And it's like greatest hits like Queen, Bowie, Steve Miller Band, like all that classic dad rock stuff that was like, if you're discovering it like in drips throughout your life, it's like a boiled frog analogy. It's just like you become like inoculated to it. But to me, it was like full on. And the kitchen was like a perfect like breeding ground for me to just dive into rock and roll. And then when I eventually moved when I was 20 to Vancouver, it was like it just leveled up because I worked in a bar and everybody was good looking and an actor or a model and cool. And, I was just a country bumpkin with like, greasy hair and pimples and baggy jeans. And I didn't know anything. And I was like, oh, what about, this band? And everybody's like, no, what about this band? So it was like, kind of like, the bar that I worked at, this is kind of like the 2005, 2004 to 2012 era. So it was like, electro clash in what we call indie sleaze now, and it was like everybody had like asymmetrical haircuts and like really skinny jeans and dirty Chuck Taylors, and it was this kind of like indie cool that it was like a crash course, and it was like a whole other version of rock and roll that I succumbed to, if you will. Really aging myself in this interview.
Skinny jeans, asymmetrical haircuts. At that time, did you identify yourself to that special style that you just mentioned?
Oh yeah, I mean, you like the restaurant that I worked at. My sister was dating the bar manager, and so yeah, talk about nepotism, right? And I was going to University of Victoria. I was 20 years old. I dropped out of UVic. I used my second semester. I had like $1,400 saved up to apply to my next semester. I told my parents, I'm going to go to Vancouver. I'm going to play some music, but I'll become a paramedic or something. Like, I still want to go to school. Don't worry, Mom and Dad. And they weren't really upset. I think my dad was for a hot minute, but my mom's like such a hippie. She's like, this is your dharma. You have to do this. So I go and, I'm like a porter, like a bar back. And there's no way I'm going to like survive beyond month 3. I'm going to run out of money very quickly because, you need to serve, you need to make actual tips. And I had like zero experience, but I was headstrong. I'm going to do this. I was always on call. Like, if you need me to like plunge toilets, I'll be there. Mop floors, I'll be there. And so, but I didn't look the part. Like, everybody was like far cooler than me. And I just, like I said, I looked like a country bumpkin. And like this one time I was like, okay, I'm going to go shopping. I've got like a couple $100. I've got to get some cooler clothes. And I was watching like what the other guys were wearing and stuff. I just didn't know where to go. And I was walking down Davie Street in this like, it's like the gay village. And so there's tons of like shops and stuff. And there was this clothing store and this lady, she was quite like infamous in the Davie Street village at the time. She ran like a boutique store. And she was always like sweeping out front. And, it was like appointment only. She was like super snooty. And I came in there being like, hey, I need some cool clothes. Like, she looked at me up and down. She's like, yeah, you're a mess. Here, come with me. And she like had me outfitted in like all these like shirts and stuff and like a white belt with like a pewter belt buckle and like a denim shirt with these little pearl buttons and like all this stuff. And so I'm like, yeah. And I'm not even looking at the price. And so keep in mind, I have my rent's $600 a month. I have $1,400 to my name to last like a couple of months. And she writes up, she punches all the stuff in. She's like, that'll be $730. And I was like, all right, do you take debit? And I was like so afraid and intimidated. I bought the clothes, and then I showed up to work the next day, and my sister and her boyfriend and all the staff were like, ugh? Like, who is this guy? Like, what makeover did you just buy for us? Like, what is going on here? And Lucy, my sister, she pulls me aside. She's like, okay, Art, so what's the deal? Where'd you get these clothes? And I'm like, I went to that store on Davie. She's like, you what? How much did you spend? And I was like, $700-ish. She's like, you don't have that kind of money. Are you insane? And then so the next day she's like, we're returning this. I'm like, I can't. She's too intimidating. This lady is insane. So we go back the next day, and sure enough, I had the clothes kind of like folded in a bag with like the tag still. And this lady was not having it. And she like convinced us, like, she's like, your brother, he needs to wear these clothes. He's ugly without them. And Lucy's like, okay, you're on your own, dude. We like left. So I was, now I had like 1 month's rent. And so I was really up against it. But yeah, that was like the crash course into like, the big smoke for me. I was just didn't know what I was doing. But I think a lot of people probably get swooned by the big city for the first time that they move to one,
Art Deco, you are definitely on another dimension when it comes to taking risk, which is very inspiring. And what happened after that remaining 1 month of of resources, if I can say that?
Well, I mean, now I had like a couple outfits to at least maybe work like a day shift, like a brunch shift serving. And so I get like assigned on the schedule, like a couple training shifts. And this is like the summer of like 2004. And back then in the restaurant, this is kind of like also formative. The restaurant was open from like 11 till 2 in the morning. DJs would play Wednesday to Saturday. It was kind of like a unique Yale town. It's no longer there anymore. But anyway, so I would go in there in the morning, and I was doing my training shifts, and there was this giant like CD changer, like 100 disc CD changer. And it was all mix CDs. One of the mix CDs, I remember to this day, like the track listing. It was like Godless by Dandy Warhols, Sound and Vision by David Bowie. There was like a couple songs off like the Blow soundtrack, like Black Betty, Can You Hear Me Knocking or whatever, like all this like cool stuff that, again, it was like formative for me because I'd never heard it, like, Prince, all this stuff. And I remember just like cranking the stereo and like just, doing roll-ups, and you're putting down chairs, and you're doing your little checklist. And I did that for the summer. And, it was like experiencing all this music and getting inspired to like form or join a band. And yeah, it was like, it was super addicting. It was kind of like, I don't know. It was like I said, it was very formative for me. So yeah, I was always able to make rent. I was always able to make ends meet. But yeah, I was getting by, the skin of my teeth. There's probably more than one occasion where I just ate like microwave popcorn or dollar pizza or whatever. But yeah, I mean, who hasn't, right?
Microwave popcorn and $1 pizzas. And since the beginning, you were always believing in yourself. And as the day of today, with this new trilogy of albums, with Trespasser in standard definition, and now with After the Head Rush, you're closing a chapter and beginning a new one.
Yeah. It's like the Paper Bag trilogy, There was an album before that, in the Gulf Islands Islands days. I think around like 2014, 15, I started like, okay, I'm gonna just like, I'm gonna put together some songs. Let's see if I can put together an album. And I put together a batch of songs, and I would do trips to Vancouver and record them and whatnot. But I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like demoing my stuff on like GarageBand on like a janky computer that, you know, the screen was like cracked to all hell. And, you know, I'm like playing like, you know, I'm recording drums with chopsticks on like a cutting board in my kitchen. Like, hopefully, you know, now there's new tenants living upstairs where my grandma used to live, and I'm in like literally my grandmother's basement. Oh man. And so, yeah, those demos formed an album called Day Fevers, and I released it and got a band together. And so all of 2016 and 17, I was like, really, okay, I want to do this on my own terms. And that's kind of when I started to like, you know, dabble in some glam rock cosplay. And I just didn't want people to know in the hometown that I was living in that I was doing this. You know, I wanted to remain anonymous. So I was like, why don't I wear a costume? So I went and like bought a wig at the mall and would wear like makeup and yeah, that kind of ran its course. And then sometime late in 2017, I recorded another album, which would become Trespasser. And that's when like labels took notice, and I signed with Paper Bag Records, and that kind of like ushered in like a new era of Deco 2.0.
Absolutely, and Art Deco. What is your plan for this upcoming powerful chapter in your creative journey? It might start with a restart and refresh, for example, of your haircuts and visual artistic side.
Yeah, I think with this new album, post global pandemic, I was thinking to myself, look, Art, you're actually pushing that midlife now. Time to strip the androgyny down, pack that into a little suitcase, tuck it into storage, be you. Obviously, I don't have blonde hair. This shit is dyed as all hell. But I wanted to kind of like reset Victor and be more me, I guess, you know. Also, the whole statement of androgyny and gender identity and all that stuff, like a lot has changed since 10 years ago. It's not transgressive. It's not cool to literally trespass into that territory if you're not really actually that. And I'm this hetero cisgendered 38-year-old dude. Like, what business do I have, you know, being androgynous and wearing a wig and pretending I'm something I'm not? So out of respect and just to kind of usher in like a different vibe, it was time to change. Eventually, when the bleach grows out and I get a haircut, maybe the next album you'll see just like a silver fox, and I will have cocooned my way out and into the world as the authentic Art we all need to know.
I truly love this new album. After the head rush, my favorite track is Only Ones. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Art Deco.
Thank you for having me, Victor.